The Kerrville City Council workshop is called to order at 4:01. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Mayor.
Keisha, you're not, it's Shelley. I thought it was going to be Keisha. Will you read into the record the public comments?
A member of the public may address City Council regarding an item on this agenda. Comments must be relevant to the agenda item. This is not intended to be a question and answer session. Prior to speaking, each speaker must fill out the speaker request form and submit it to the city secretary. The speaker request form must be submitted before the meeting is called to order, and each speaker is limited to 4 minutes. There are no citizen speakers signed up.
Thank you. All right. And Chief, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Back there, Council. Moving on to our presentation. So I'm the city liaison for the Recovery Community Coalition, and it is my honor to introduce the chair of the Recovery Coalition, Sabine Kunsel, to provide a report for the achievements and the future of the RCC.
Good evening, Sabine. Glad to have you.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Forget where I got to point this thing to click. There we go.
There you go.
So, yes, my name is Sabina Kinsel, and it has been my honor the past few months to head up the Kerrville Recovery Coalition. However, I do need to give a shout out to the previous chairs. Just before me was Dr. Kendall Young, and before her was Dale Trees. I'll be referring to the two of them, and both of them have done a beautiful job in leading this group. I wanted to, because it's been a while since we've been before you, I wanted to kind of go back and kind of give you a bird's eye view of really kind of everything that has been occurring and how we've sort of evolved to be to where we are today. So this is just a reminder throughout with some of the changes through the resolutions. This council has passed a couple of resolutions, and then the more recent ordinance. But the charge to the Recovery Coalition has remained the same throughout. And I won't read this slide to you, but basically it's really kind of twofold. My understanding that we do have a pretty large, relatively large recovery community here. That a lot of folks that are in recovery for many years, long-term recovery, or just entering recovery. So the charge has been to better integrate where we see barriers, to integrate the recovery community into the regular community. Now, most of the time you probably won't be able to just tell who's in recovery and who's not. So they're already fairly well integrated into the community, but are there some barriers, some unnecessary barriers that we could recommend to you, make you aware of, because we have a more of an ear to the ground. As far as what are some of those things that we would suggest that you support us in paying more attention to and really rolling up our sleeves and getting into the details, and then reporting the larger, bigger picture to you. And then also to advocate within the community itself. Where are some things that we can identify from a really kind of from a, I guess, a policy standpoint, or some things that we can see, because we have, we're in the community, we represent kind of a broad range of industries that work either directly or indirectly impact the recovery community, and some things that we might see within the community itself that we might want to recommend to the community. And of course, we want to have that link and be that link there. And then on an annual basis, to make a report then back to you. Now, this is only the third annual update, report back to you. The first year, we had a little bit of a rocky beginning. We had a huge, as you probably recall, we had a fairly large board or advisory board to you. And there were a few times that it was really tough to meet quorum that first year. Once we got rolling, we really focused on the first impetus really that was So this was the first annual review. I just want to really quickly summarize that. That first year and a half, we really, and I say we, in some way or another, I've been involved with the Criminal Recovery Coalition since it really began in 2017, it started meeting and trying to tackle the impetus. There had been kind of an outcry from the recovery community on the boarding home ordinance that had been passed by this council. But in your charge to the board, you, I think wisely, can look at broader picture. What if a board like this, an advisory board, is put in place, isn't there more recovery related issues or questions that we could review and bring back to you? Ergo the larger, more broad charge. But at first we spent quite a bit of time, this was actually before I was technically on the board, but we spent quite a bit of time discussing that ordinance. Eventually coming up with a recommendation that at that point there was really not too much that the board would recommend to change. Actually nothing specifically. Standing ready to at any point, if this council wanted us to look at it again, that we would do that. However, because of the Fair Housing Act and a lot of other legal constraints and restraints that we would have for those discussions, we would like to have a pretty heavy legal input at that if we ever do that again, or we're asked to do that again. So that once we got away from that ordinance, we formed.
Sabine, can I ask you a quick question? What happened, I wasn't on council until 2019, and I remember this ordinance and I remember what it created. So staff or Sabine, what, did that ordinance get repealed or is it still in place? I know it was what a half mile between facilities, and are we still at that same point right now or have things changed? I just need a refresher on that.
I don't believe it's changed. Has it changed at all during?
Because I don't think since my time on council I've approved
We've
any
changed
kind,
anything,
well,
no.
but I don't think we've approved any permits, right?
it
For
wouldn't have-
our usage for the.
Well, it wouldn't.
Permits don't come to y'all.
I'm sorry, not
That's-
permit, so,
right.
okay, so it's strictly a permit, it's not like a CUP or anything like that?
No, this is
Okay,
like
so
a
we don't
business-
see those,
Right,
okay.
this is like a business licensing.
All right, okay, cool, all right,
scheme.
thank you, sorry to interrupt you, I just wanted to be clear.
No, there's that's a good question, and again, I think what we as an advisory board concluded was that if those kinds of questions came up, that we would for changing the ordinance, that we would be ready and happy to help you kind of get into the details and meet behind the scenes before we made any kind of recommendations for any changes to the ordinance. Now, there is a variance procedure to specifically what you're asking about, which is the distance between from one home to another of the boarding homes in general. My understanding is that the only right now the only boarding home licenses that the city has are for recovery homes, but it's a broader category.
Okay.
There is a variance provision that would eventually come to you, and I believe that you have reviewed at least one, if maybe two in the past, and that's been a while.
I don't remember.
But that was the main sticking point, yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, appreciate that.
So once we broke off, we had a larger group at that time, and there were specific areas of interest that we wanted to focus on, and we formed little subcommittees off of the Recovery Coalition, looking at public relations. How can we improve the negative stigma of some of the folks in recovery in general? So that we had a little group that was working on that. Transportation. That has come up through listening sessions and through some other means that within the recovery community and early recovery, transportation is an issue, getting back and forth to job and to meetings and other services. And then also subcommittee on resources, linking because we do have a lot of resources that the recovery community can access. It's just hard to access. And a lot of it is information. You have the services and you have the need. How do you better link the two and make one group aware of the other? So we were looking at that, but we weren't new at that. So at that point, one of the requirements in the report is to also then report to you some successes and achievements. And at that time, we reported that we believed that we had opened a channel of communication to provide some linkage. There's still sometimes this understanding that we probably don't have enough visibility, that a lot of in the recovery community don't really quite know that we're there. We still discuss that to this day, but we had that in the annual report. At least we made a beginning on that. And we did reach out to people working on the front lines. What are some of these conflict points? Went and spoke to people in law enforcement in particular at that time. We raised some awareness of the positive opportunities, but also the challenges. And just in general, broad general, we thought that we were starting to have a little difference on the overall health, safety, and wellness of the community. So then the next time we actually were almost on track with an annual presentation. So the second year in 2019 made a report back on the previous year, 2018 really, but up through a certain month in 2019. I believe it was mid 2019. I'm not going to list everything on these next two slides, but we just had pretty jam-packed agendas where we invited in a lot of people to speak to us. A lot of agencies, a lot of representatives, people in the nonprofits, and even in some lesser known areas of the recovery community, some budding nonprofits, or some opportunities for funding, for services and new services to try to address some gaps. So we were really kind of more in listening mode at that point. So this was kind of the second and the third year of actually working here, working within the Recovery Coalition. There was something on this that I wanted to point out. Oh, the 86th legislative session, we did start to look and pay attention to what was happening in the state legislature as well, and had some local movers and shakers come in and talk to us about what kind of keep an eye on of what's happening in that was recovery related and would impact the recovery community as well. And I will tell you, getting back to the ordinance, I think that we were kind of cutting edge here in Kerrville to create an ordinance. I know it's really more in general to the boarding home land use versus recovery homes specifically, but recovery homes have been a source of discussion there as well. So we're paying attention. Haven't really had just some discussion along those lines. So we are aware that there may be some changes coming. And then, so we kind of take, I shouldn't say hats, but we kind of do two things on the Recovery Coalition since that time. And one is the listening, but the other is participating in some activities. Just realized I have the wrong word on here. Not auctions. We don't auction anything. Activities and actions is what that should say. The Big Texas Rally, the Holiday Lighted Parade, we had a little float that year.
I think we may be one slide behind you.
Oh,
Slide.
there we go. Okay, thank you. Yes, this is actions, not auctions. there was some representation on at Capitol Day on Capitol Hill in Austin. And also participated in a recovery rally here in the Hill Country. And this is where the little resource guide was born. Okay. So again, as I mentioned, so we have services available, and then we have needs, and there has been talk way before we came on the scene, but there has been talk in the community of a center, of a recovery resource center. And unless and until such time comes, at least having something that can start that process, at least having somebody start to ask the questions. And so this is something that we did. Is we created this little pocket resource guide, and that would be available to newcomers to recovery, newcomers really to the community that are in need of recovery-related services. So this is just something that really can go anywhere, because a lot of these folks don't have access to a computer yet. So this is just something that can be readily available. For a while, I had a lot of these floating around in my car, and I think a lot of the coalition members did as well. So another thing that we did, and this is one of the, this is something that we sponsored in way of blood, sweat, and tears. Not a whole lot of money or funding, because there were a lot of donations, just a lot of resources that came together for this International Night of Remembrance. It is truly international, and we participated in 2019 for the first time in that event. There are, I can't remember how many countries now. A lot. When I actually went online to put a little summary and update of what we had done here to include on this international website, I tried to print out the summaries, very small summaries that each of the places around the globe had put together on this one night. And I started printing it out, and I stopped the printing. I mean, it was going to be about 300 pages worth. So pretty amazing to be a part of. And it's kind of a mix of a memorial type of remembering those that we lost to overdose of really any kind, whether it be alcohol or opioids, but also to have resources there as well, to have resource tables, to be able to have people just come. So part of it was ours was more of an open house type at first, and then we had a program where we highlighted some local talent in mostly young folks in recovery that played music, and then also had some people speaking up, getting up to speak of their lost ones, their loved ones, and that was real powerful. Then we had a little vigil outside. We were actually in the newspaper. So it was a pretty powerful event. Then, of course, COVID came along and disrupted all of that momentum. Okay, so since COVID, what have we been doing? Again, we've had the listening function part of it. Again, I'm not going to read everything that's on this slide of what we heard. The Mental Health Coalition, that is a coalition that you're familiar with. We were excited to see that firing up, and we had a lot of discussion on how the Recovery Coalition could have a link to that, and vice versa. We're not finished with those discussions, and of course, like I said, COVID disrupted them as well. But there's been a lot of talk about that, because we have a lot of, in the recovery community, there's relatively high percentage of what we call co-occurring disorders, anywhere really from to about 50% of people that are suffering from addiction suffer from another disorder as well. So so there is a lot of overlap potential and a lot of opportunity there. On the right slide here. And here are some more listening, the folks of the agencies that we heard from. We've been following the drug court, and we had a second presentation from the drug court. Not too much more on this slide to highlight unless y'all have questions. And so again, because of COVID, not a whole lot of activities or actions because a lot of events weren't taking place. We did tour, again, in the interest of some overlap and using other models and visiting other models that exist throughout the state. We did a tour of a community resource center in Marble Falls. And as I said, we've been paying attention to the Mental Health Coalition as well. So that happened really relatively early on. And I put on the slide we narrowed our areas of interest. I think with what you just saw on some of these slides, especially in the pre-COVID, we had a lot of presentations. And a lot of it was, well, that's very interesting and great, but where can we help and what can we really bring back to you as a result of all that? And I think it's been really difficult to distinguish, and even some folks that presented to us have when I reached back out to them, they asked me, "Who are you again?" So I think we may have spread ourselves a little too thin, and then also as you've heard already, we had a hard time reaching quorum last year. And so because of that, we could not pull together another night of remembrance. We did the previous year, actually in 2020, during the first year of COVID, we actually did put together a night of remembrance. It was a Zoom, but it was still fairly well attended for it being a Zoom. And again, we didn't really want to lose momentum, but it just didn't come together last year. So that brings me to where we are today and what we'd like to continue doing. Just overall, as far as the events go, the discussion has been recently. There are two exceptions to this, and I'll go into those in a second here. But really, this is a third bullet point here. Really, what we've said is, in general, we really don't have the resources to be able to bring any more of our own events. So when there are a lot of other events that are recovery related, and what we'd like to do then is have a presence there. With the resources and some of the resources also that we represent. The two exceptions then are the Night of Remembrance. We would like to come back to that idea. There has been some pretty good ground already forged as far as some people to talk to, some ideas of already in place of what we can pull together, and what format we'd like it to take and continue taking in the future. Now, we just talked about that last night, yesterday at the Recovery Coalition meeting, and right now, again, we have a smaller board, which we think was a really good idea, but with that, we also have a reduced representation as far as being for somebody to be able to lead the effort. So even though this started out as being a Kerrville Recovery Coalition event, with others, of course, within it and providing resources, but right now we really don't have anybody to actually physically lead it. lead that effort. So what we talked about yesterday was we had some fabulous people that used to be on the Recovery Coalition or that were associated with with recovery closely with the coalition that we'd like to reach out to. In fact, I just reached out to one last night who, and that's Dr. Young, and she agreed to. Now she's not on the Recovery Coalition anymore, term limited, but she said that she would take on that role. I have not even told this to the Recovery Coalition yet, but everybody wants to help. Everybody wants to do a big part of it, but nobody can manage it, either because they don't themselves have the time, or they've never done it before. They'd like to, but they've never done it before, so they don't have enough experience to pull it all together. So but we would like to continue really heavily participating in that. I call this a holiday luncheon, although we didn't really want to restrict ourselves to the holidays. Last December, we had a luncheon with the recovery home managers and owners to have a listening session again. So we've had some successes. What are those? We still have a lot of challenges. What are those? And we heard some things that were interesting that we didn't really realize before. And some things that just continue to be an issue. So we'd like to continue doing that once a year, and hosting it, a luncheon where we just sit together and have relatively open-ended, a little bit of structure around it, but again and that can then feed, as it has this year somewhat, feed into the work that the coalition would like to focus on. Now the Warrens Clinic idea came out of one of our members, Thomas Hurt, who and this is something that another function that we serve, I guess, is to as just moral support, really, and then eventually we would also provide some physical support, some ideas maybe, but overall, what Thomas would like to do is to bring a Warrens Clinic that he's been involved with in Bexar County, to bring that here.
What is a Warrens Clinic?
In broad general, my understanding, and he's made a couple of really great presentations to us on this, and it's continued to be an item on our agenda. But essentially, there are a lot of folks where they have outstanding warrants that are in recovery, but not necessarily in recovery itself. I mean, it would not just be limited to people in recovery, but that are starting new lives and trying to start new lives. And a big obstacle is that they have these warrants that they don't know how to. Some of them don't even know that they have these warrants out, or they know, but they don't know that's just an obstacle, and it's been frustrating for them to try to address. And a lot of them are relatively small, relatively minor, and I believe we're only talking about some minor offenses. But to have one day where folks can come without repercussions and to be assisted through the process to clear up the warrants. What will they have to do to clear up those warrants so that when they apply for jobs, when they try to get a driver's license, whatever it is, they're an obstacle it is an obstacle for what they're trying to do, what we'd like to do. So we're still discussing that. Like I said, it'll be on the agenda for the next few months. And then we did talk to Chief about updating this resource guide. We still have several copies of these left from 2019, but Chief has a force that has volunteers that have updated these. Now, there is somebody on the coalition right now that provided the data for it, but then they actually physically went in and updated these by hand.
Do you have copies of those that we can have?
I'll get them.
Okay.
We'll get them for tonight.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then, so to update these as well and have another printing, but we still have several of the older ones to hand out. And then what I would personally like to put on the agenda once once we get a few more months down the road, is to actually have a little better discussion of strategies on how to distribute them.
I was going to ask you how you
We have
did.
that many, right?
How do you
So-
do that right now?
Pardon?
How do you do that right now?
Well, we haven't been. Early on in 2019, there were people off of the coalition that just physically went and handed them to people that they know in the community.
Yeah, not update.
And they were, yeah, folks on the coalition.
Yes.
But again, since we don't have as many people on the coalition, but we do, well, it'll be a discussion item. Let's put it that way on how to do that.
Okay.
Another, you've seen it, I'm sure. There's a senior resource guide that where there's a link off of the Kerrville website, the city website, to the senior resource guide. It's a great link that we would also like to have linked back to a grouping that is more focused on the recovery community as well. That is all I have for you.
Other questions, council?
Is the information on that little fold out thing, is it all still relevant or does it need to be updated?
We have Randy Benno. She is over at MHDD, so that's her profession, but she is on our coalition, and she is she's been updating. She's been adding some, and then one or two numbers had to be changed on here. But she's been spearheading that effort to update. So before we make copies, it will be. I believe she's finished with that effort, but she's been the clearinghouse for that information.
But MHDD, I would think, would be one place that you would already have these for distribution.
Yeah, I can't speak for Randy, but yeah, I mean, really everywhere where anything that we have on here, right?
Those should
that's-
be there,
mhm.
yes.
I don't know if we ever had a concerted, organized effort on distribution, and that's what I think we
Okay.
need to do.
Mr. Hoppy, is there a problem with getting one of those and putting it on our website?
Yeah, so we're looking at a number of ways in regards to better information distribution on our website, whether that's linking up with the existing RCC kind of board page, or whether that's a separate page that could be kind of attached to our website, but also look kind of standalone. So the commission and chief and our communications folks are working through that, but we're trying to provide avenues for multiple modes of communication.
And are you connected with the Homeless Coalition? Because a lot of the homeless also have the addiction issues. And
Absolutely.
do you have a contact at the Homeless Coalition to engage in maybe not having any duplicate services and that sort of thing, and intermingling some of their issues with some of yours?
We don't anymore currently. There was a representative on the coalition a while back who's very interested in hopelessness and in those issues. But that is a thought that we could look into and linking up there as well. I don't know if the Mental Health Coalition is doing that right now, but I would imagine there's a lot of overlap there too.
Yeah.
Do you have numbers for the number of people in recovery that I'm sure it's a fluctuating number, I understand, but do you have a ballpark number?
As far as how the numbers here and how we compare with other cities, like
No,
cities of
not
our
a
size.
comparison with others, just a number for Kerrville that,
Not an actual number.
okay.
It's more of a kind of gut. We just we know, well, one of the I'll tell you, one of the issues that we hear from the sober homes is that employment is not really a problem for the folks in their homes, but underemployment is. So
What do you
there
mean by underemployment?
underemployment, and you can have somebody with a PhD waiting on you at
Okay,
on your at your table, for instance.
okay.
Mayor, if I may.
Yes.
So you had mentioned in moving forward, you want to you would look at getting an agenda item. I want to clarify, were you seeking something for city council to have on their agenda in terms of helping you and supporting you on this? Or is that something that you're wanting an agenda item for the Recovery Community Coalition to look forward?
At the moment, at the recovery community
At that stage, okay.
coalition,
And
yeah.
do you have a timeline of when, or if at all, you may need to come back to council and ask for support on anything? Or I don't know how that usually works in terms of support or approval on certain things.
Well, actually, in the past, we've just sort of been waiting for the annual report time. That's been in the back of our head. But Chief has mentioned that we don't really need to wait for an annual report. If we have a pressing issue, and we believe that it's ready, and we've discussed it, and we have consensus on the coalition to bring in a policy recommendation to you, then we'll do that.
Okay.
So is there anything that you need from us today?
I don't believe so. We're not asking for anything. I believe it's on the agenda just in case you want to give us direction, but there's really nothing that we're asking.
But definitely, if there's, yes, you don't have to you don't have to wait for a reporting time. If you guys have something that you need from us, absolutely come to us.
And vice versa, we're open to hearing anything, to like I said, I think our mission is, if before you have to grapple with a sticky subject, that we have discussed it and looked at all of the angles before and made some recommendations and laid out some options for you before, so that you're not blindsided.
What does our budget look like when it comes to boards and coalitions?
Yeah, so typically, we don't have specific budgets for boards and coalitions. As you know, many of these are advisory type components, and so oftentimes any budgetary requirements are built into the departments that may be liaising with them. For instance, Parks and Rec Advisory Board, right? I mean, it's tied to Parks and Rec Department, and there's kind of a budgetary.
We won't see a line item for any.
There aren't. We've had some very minor expenses, and we've been able to accommodate those either within the general fund budget of general operations or within fire and EMS budget, which obviously there's a connection there, just from an expense standpoint for some service provisions. So it's been very minor, so it hasn't been an item that we've felt like we needed to separately budget.
How did you fund the first batch that was printed?
The first batch, I'm not sure. Yeah, that was
I think we just put those within the general operations budget.
General
It was very
operation. Okay.
minor.
Yeah.
The cost, the cost for that, the 500, Sabina, what was the cost? It was 500. It wasn't.
the new estimate. We just received a new estimate. I don't have that number with me here. But yeah,
Hundreds. So.
yeah, a few $100s. Yeah.
All right. Chief, anything you would like to add?
No, I enjoy being the city liaison for the board. I took over for Chief Smith, of course, so and filled in my role when I had an opportunity there over the past few years as deputy, and enjoy working with them and helping them along the way. So.
Good. Council, any other comments, questions?
Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Sabrina, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And, don't hesitate to come see us.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. At this time, we are scheduled for an executive session upstairs. So would someone like to make a motion?
I'll move, Mayor, that we move into executive session on items. Are we going under all of these items that are listed here?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. Okay. 551.071, .072, and 0.087.
I'll second that.
All in favor? All right, we will be adjourned to executive session at 4:40.